Hi, everybody. Today's Thursday, March 12th, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother Alex Krainer is here with us. Welcome back.
Hi, Nima. It's good to be with you always, and warm greetings to everyone watching and listening.
Alex, let me start with one of the latest news here. And we know that the United States is trying to do the maximum possible to defend Israel. But one of the latest, news coming out of, South Korea is the 7 THAAD system were removed from South Korea and they are sending them to Israel. And we have the footages here, showing these air defense systems. What is happening is just amazing, all this rhetoric that we are defending South Korea, North Korea gonna attack you, you have to be careful. But they're removing all of those air defense systems, and leaving South Korea naked if we assume that the United States rhetoric is right and they are under the threat from these North Korea. But when it comes to the conflict, I think it has many things to do with what's going on the battlefield and what's going on right now. How did you find the war so far as it happened and it somehow is increasing in some sort of escalation?
Well, it only shows that Iran was well prepared for this. And I am only dumbfounded that Trump went ahead all the same. He was warned by his chief of operations, Admiral Fred Catcher, not to do this. Well, he fired him. He was warned by the intelligence agencies telling him, we cannot sustain a war against Iran. It's extremely unlikely that we will be able to defeat Iran or overthrow their government. So everything that's happening shouldn't come as a surprise. And, I know, Trump and his hegsets, they're going to come out and they're going to say, oh, the fact that we're bringing the THAAD system from South Korea to defend Israel only proves how incredibly well the war is going. It's the best military operation ever in the history of the universe. Nobody's ever seen anything like it before. Blah, 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 blah. We're winning. But by this point, you really have to have an IQ below 20 to even buy any of this. It simply cannot be true. All the signs were pointing towards a defeat. And then, the same military machinery has been unable to defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan after 20 years of trying. 10 years of trying to subdue Ansar Allah in Yemen. Failure. And then Iran is so much more powerful than both of these players and have been very, very, very well prepared for all this. I mean, attacking Iran was so stratospherically dumb that I can't even, I still, honestly, Nima, sometimes I think in my head, I still can't believe that they did it. I still cannot believe that they launched this war. I think that Trump launched the war expecting that he will be able to end it very quickly, a couple of days, bombardments, intimidate the Iranians, bring them to the negotiating table as supplicants, begging, please stop, we'll do whatever you ask of us. And that he would be able to, declare victory and pretend, show to the world how incredibly successful he has been at everything he touched. But I think here he miscalculated catastrophically. I think he miscalculated, Nima, but it was so hard to make this miscalculation because he should have known. He had people around him who advised him to not do this. He had intelligence agencies telling him to not do this. I can't even understand. I can't even begin. Not only that, but Nima, like if you do something and you say like, I'll just take the gamble and maybe I get lucky. Okay. But if you say, okay, if I win, I get that much. If I lose, it could be the end of everything. It could undo everything I've been trying to do all my life. At that point, you said, that's a stupid gamble. That's too much of a dumb gamble. I shouldn't do it. And then nobody has done it before. They have been it's been more than 20 years that Western powers have been wanting to overthrow the Iranian government. Well, and we also have the video from General Wesley Clark, who was saying 7 countries in 5 years. That was in 2007, meaning, Iran was supposed to be last. So Iran regime change was due in 2012, but nobody has done it. Clinton didn't do it. George Bush didn't do it. Obama didn't do it. Biden didn't do it. Even Trump, in his first term, refused to do it. Why he went ahead and did it now is completely beyond me. I don't understand.
How do you see the combination of forces in Washington? Because this decision is not only it's not just about Donald Trump. It's about the combination of vectors, those people who are influential in Washington and who's running the show in Washington. Because after all, Donald Trump said to the Arab states in the Persian Gulf that this war is going to be over in 4 days. That shows how it was a great gamble on his part. He said he thought that he's going to do the regime change. The regime is just the foundation of the Iranian so-called regime is not there anymore. Is destroyed because of these protests that they have created, and then they turned those protests into riots. They showed all the evidences they wanted to show to the public opinion all around the world that something big is about to happen in Iran. Then started the attack. And
I find it very, very difficult to judge what's going on in the United States, because on the one hand you have this hubristic trash talk from the Trump administration, because they're trying to for political reasons they're trying to present themselves as competent, in control, they're winning, everything's going great, right? At the same time, if I speak with American people who are there close to the government circles, but not quite in the government, there's a kind of a revolt. They feel betrayed. They really feel betrayed. They feel that the administration is out of control, that administration is not doing what the American people wanted, what the American people voted for. In fact, it's exactly opposite of what the American people voted for. And so there's a lot of them who are feeling frustrated and betrayed. And then there are many who just simply believe, okay, Trump is a fail, but there's a broader movement under the surface that really does want things that Trump promised. there's still a very large, powerful movement that wants to free the United States from the shackles of globalism. They want to reestablish the American independence, and they do want to bring the United States back to the American system, reindustrialize the country, repair the infrastructure, invest in industries, in research, in innovation, and all these things that, up until the 28th of February, we thought Trump promised to do and Trump was going to do. And then, it wasn't so long ago that Trump and his delegations were at the Munich Security Conference and at the Davos gathering in Switzerland in January, that they were saying exactly those things. And it seemed that, Trump and his government were doing what they promised to the American people. And then, inexplicably, over Iran or over Israel or over, I don't even know what exactly, he gambled everything away. And now I think his credibility is disintegrating. I understand that there are many people who interpret this as a very clever gambit to attack the city of London and to eject them from the Middle East, But I think at this point, it doesn't even matter, because very, very few people are by now inclined to put their confidence in Trump and his government. So even if you have some really, really clever strategy, it doesn't matter. You're going to lose popular support. And without popular support, everything falls apart.
Yeah, they're literally feeling betrayed. If you listen to Tucker Carlson, even Megyn Kelly, she came out and, that Donald Trump is betraying. These policies are not the ones that we voted for. These are huge, huge characters within the Republican Party to influence the public opinion, and they're reflecting the public opinion within the Republican Party. They're not shaping it. They're reflecting what they see. And I think one of the main, they say that it doesn't matter you vote Republican or Democrat, always you get John McCain. But I think we can say it doesn't matter you vote Democrat or Republican, you always get Lindsey Graham running the show. The guy was, when Biden was in office, he was one of the closest, senators to Joe Biden. And right now he's one of the closest senators to Donald Trump. Donald Trump coming out and, just seeing Marjorie Taylor Brown, calling Marjorie
Green.
Taylor. No, he called him Brown.
Oh, he called her Brown.
Yeah, he called him Marjorie Taylor Brown. And because green turned to brown when you are so angry, these are not little things to be ignored for those people who voted for Donald Trump. And they don't want war. These people were so obvious in their main goal. They want a United States to produce things, not to import things. They wanted the United States to be in a better shape without these endless wars. And these people are coming out and talking about it. It doesn't matter because this is a war that Donald Trump has entered. And from what we've learned so far, Iranian officials, they're talking about no ceasefire. What is?
Yes.
And many people in the United States understand what's going on with this war.
Yeah, I agree, Nima. It's a disaster that's only started. And so American people are probably right to feel betrayed, because obviously they didn't vote for this. And it doesn't matter if you think that there's some very, very clever strategy. And I wouldn't discount it. I would like to know more about it, but there's very little evidence that there's anything clever about this. It really looks like it was just a gamble. and it was a dumb gamble. But if you are Iran, you have no interest in ending this soon, because Iran has been bullied and harassed by Western colonial powers for more than for nearly 120 years. And the British already deployed troops in Iran during World War I. They started the war in Europe, and while the French and the Russians and the Germans were slaughtering each other in massive numbers, the British deployed troops to the Middle East. Massive amount of troops, I think 60 or 70,000 troops, a lot of them in Iran, because of the oil. They wanted to control the oil. And then they set up the Anglo-American Oil Company, which still exists. It's called BP today. And they controlled the bulk of the Iran's oil production. And by World War II, they persuaded, which is an amazing thing, they persuaded Stalin to occupy northern Iran while they were occupying southern Iran. And then they already created a regime change, because they toppled Mohammad Reza Pahlavi that time in favor of his son, who was going to be their puppet.
It was Reza Pahlavi. Yeah. Reza Shah. They call it Reza Shah. His father, Mohammad Reza, was the son who was replaced.
Oh, Mohammad Reza was the son.
Against the father, and put him in place his son. Yeah. Mohammad Reza was the son.
And then, nobody was talking about women's rights and burqas and headscarves, but it was about oil, obviously, as it is today. And, at that time, around the late 1940s, the United States Standard Oil Company was in Venezuela, and they had a 50-50 split with the Venezuelan government. 50-50 split in, I'm not sure if profits or revenues, but whichever, it was kind of almost fair. At the same time, the Iranians calculated that they were only getting about 8% of Anglo-Iranian oil companies' profits. 8%. And so they said, well, in the name of justice and fairness, I think we think it should be 50-50. And then immediately, the BBC started a campaign of demonizing the Iranian government, of, the British Navy sent their Navy ships to Abadan, I think, where they Abadan. It was Anglo-Iranian Oil Company operated the world's largest oil refinery back then. So, the British made sure to control it by force. And then, what was it, 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh becomes prime minister, democratically elected. He says, we're nationalizing, if you want share fairly, then we're going to take it over and we're going to manage it ourselves. And then 2 years later, the Americans, the CIA, the Dulles brothers, and the British, the MI6, they overthrow the government, bring back the Shah, and then the Shah gets uppity, and then they intervene again in the 1979 revolution. And now that that government has become independent and focused on the Iranian people and the Iranian nation, now they want to bring back the Shah again, the same Shah Reza. I mean, you couldn't make it up, Nima. If you wrote a film with this script, nobody would agree. They would say, like, this is too stupid. Nobody would do this, but we keep doing it. And so, I mean, the reason why I'm saying all this, Nima, is because this has been going on for more than a century. And that century included war, regime change, coups, famine in the early 1940s. Tens of thousands of Iranians died of famine because the Soviet and the British troops requisitioned bulk of agricultural production of Iran for their troops. So Iranian people had no food to eat. And it just never stopped. It never stopped. The rationales change. the Shah is decadent, and so we're going to have a revolution. Now the mullahs are evil and they oppress women, so we're going to bring the Shah and democracy, blah blah. But it's always about oil. It's always about the control of the region, control of the waterways, control of the resources. And Iranians have had enough, because it has suffocated their economic development. It has kept them under siege almost nonstop. And when you're under siege, you can't develop properly, because a nation under siege will inevitably have to be a lot more repressive than it would be otherwise. Because if you have your country crawling with Mossad, MI6, CIA assets who are trying to undermine your system and destroy it, well, then you have to be oppressive. You have to, be extremely focused on the defense against external and internal enemies. So you get a regime that is more oppressive than it would be otherwise. So obviously, Iranians have had enough of this, and now they want total victory. They want to remove the root causes of all this, which means that probably they will want to destroy all of the Western proxies in the region. And that means Israel, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, and throw out all the Western military outposts in the region, British, American, and others. And so that cannot be done in a few days, and it cannot be done in a few weeks. So I'm convinced that Iranians have prepared for a long war of attrition, and that they will wage a long war of attrition, and that they will not accept any ceasefire that will allow Western colonialist powers to, rebuild, regroup, and keep the status quo. And then maybe another few years from now, again, start harassing Iran and threatening war, regime change, coups, blockades, embargoes, and so on and so forth. So this was for anybody paying attention, they should have expected this reaction from Iran. If you read a little bit of history, if you pay attention, Iran is fully in their right to take this view and to take this action. How you thought that you were going to do it in 2-3 days or a few weeks is probably going to go down in history as one of the dumbest blunders ever committed by anybody.
Alex, you mean that this is the war of century for Iran to survive?
I think that this is an existential war for Iran, and it's a war of Iran's emancipation, because Iran didn't start this. They have tried for many years to find a negotiated diplomatic solution to their differences with the Western powers, and they stayed at the negotiating table to the very, very last. But now that the West has chosen war and thrown the first punch, now Iran has the right to pull out their whole Christmas list of what they want. And yes, this is this changes the future for the long term. This could be the beginnings of the golden age of Western Asia. Obviously it's going to be painful in the short term, but wait, didn't they say short-term pain for the long-term gain? Yeah, except that only works for Iran. That doesn't work for the United States.
Alex, Iran started, with the attacks on the Arab states in the Persian Gulf, the mostly attacking American bases in the Persian Gulf. It started with the radars or the sophisticated equipment in these countries. And they're getting to Israel. Mostly one of the most important radars in Israel was destroyed 24 hours ago. And that was the backbone of the whole defense system of Israel. I think so far what we've seen, with the attack, the assassination, the initial hours of attacks and assassination of the supreme leader of Iran, which was supposed to collapse the so-called regime in Iran, and then the attacks, which was so much tragic for the whole Iranian population, which was the attack on the school girls, from the age of 7 to 12, they were assassinated. They were burned to ashes by the attacks. But you don't see Iran going after civilians. You see Iran not changing its strategy, and they're keeping their eyes on the strategic, locations to hit them. And how did you find the whole interaction between the West and Iran, considering these escalations, moral escalations, attacking children, then Iranian response?
Okay, that's a very interesting question, Nima. And I have now been suspecting for a very long time that there are certain people in the Western structures of power, and I think that by today they have a name. They're called the Epstein class. There's something to this, who actually like to inflict a lot of casualties on their enemy, but they also like to sacrifice a lot of their own troops. And I don't know why it is. There's something very dark about this, and I wonder if it has a spiritual dimension, because, when you read history and then you read about the firebombing of Dresden, it wasn't just Dresden, it was practically all of the German cities. You read about the firebombing of Japan. Most people are aware of the nuclear bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They're not aware that about 80 Japanese cities have been bombed through, not with nukes, but with incendiary bombs. So that was the firebombing campaign at the end of World War II, and it was done in a way to maximize civilian casualties, because the incendiary bombs were dropped together with the types of bombs that destroyed roads, that would create large holes in the roads so that the fire squads couldn't move through the cities and reach the, put out the fires, and that was done very deliberately. And then we had, Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia and North Korea, and in more recent times, Fallujah, Iraq, and so forth. And it seems that always there's this needless violence that ends up killing a lot of people, but the strategic need to do that is not clear at all. A lot of American military generals knew that firebombing of Germany was not necessary, that the firebombing of Japan and the 2 nukes were not necessary. It was disputed, it was not like, yes, we need to do it, there's no question about it, so, let's just go ahead and do it. So certain people pushed for it deliberately. I can't understand why exactly, but this seems to be a certain dark streak that accompanies Western military engagements throughout the world. And then, if we go back earlier to the British Empire, we know that in the 120-year period of direct British rule between 1757 and 1880, about, I think, that India was under direct British rule. India experienced 31 famines. And obviously, if you read British gentlemen's history of colonialist period in India, this is all very unfortunate. The Indians didn't master agriculture, and so there were all these natural disasters and crop failures, and oh well. But if you take that period of 31 famines in 120 years, meaning a famine once every 4 years, and then you compare that to the independence from 1947 onwards, India has suffered not a single famine. It's been more than 80 years, so they should have had, in 80 years, they should have already had 20 famines, but they had 0. And then, India is an old civilization, so they have records, so they know that they endured 16 famines in 2,000 years preceding the British rule. So that's less than one in a century. There's, they say correlation is not causation, but somebody would have to explain to me, why did India have fewer than one famine a century when they were independent, and they had one famine every 4 years under the British rule? I would need to understand that. And then, Iran had a famine while part of it was occupied by the British. Many African nations experienced famines. We have British statesmen like Benjamin Disraeli, who was saying, like, well, we're going to use famine to bludgeon these, primitive peoples into submission and so forth. And I think that this mindset, which seems demonic, continues to propagate itself through the Western system, through a system of governance, and people who come close to the seats of power, I think, have this inclination that they see. Well, we've seen it now with Epstein, what they've done. Obviously they have no qualms about doing anything. They perceive humans as vermin, as hackable animals or whatever. So I think that this is the difference. I think that whoever sheds tears about Western civilization is not looking at things critically enough. We need to reform the Western civilization. And this whole subject is almost difficult to believe, because when you study history, they don't tell you any of this. It's always the West is, the garden, and the rest of the world is a jungle. And so we go around helping people and aiding and teaching them how to do this and that. And this is why our troops are there. And this is why our consultants are there. And that's what our diplomats do. But, these people are just too primitive to understand. Anyhow, Nima, by this point, I've forgotten even the question that I was answering. So I know it had
the question was that the way that the West is attacking, for example, civilians, and the way that Iran is responding.
Yeah.
It seems to me the same, because they try to manipulate, the conflict in Ukraine in the same way, with this assassination. They try to make it, to inflict suffering on and civilians. That's the main goal. And then you see these states like Russia and Iran, they're mostly focused on strategic targets. Yes. They know what they're fighting and what is the main goal, what they want to achieve after this fight is over.
Yeah, correct. And I think that this is this is our normal. This is how it is, And then I think that even Trump completely shred his credibility on this, because, since the beginning of his presidency, he's been trying to broker peace in Ukraine, always saying, like, the killing has to stop, the killing has to stop, all these beautiful people who are getting killed, and it's not right, and we need to bring peace so the killing would stop. And now, he turned on a dime, and he's talking about blowing up Iran so that it could never be rebuilt again, which, what are you talking about? You're talking about nukes, which means that you're ready to kill a lot of civilians. Now suddenly it doesn't matter. And then, destroying a desalinization plant in Iran, that doesn't matter because these people are evil. And then the schoolgirls, whatever, we don't know. Suddenly, human life is no longer so precious and sacred as it was until 28 February. So either you were lying before or you're lying now, but your credibility is done, because, gosh, look at how carefully countries like China, Russia, Iran conduct their foreign policy, because they understand that it's, you have to do things delicately, that you have to achieve your policy objectives in an honorable way, in a way that is right, in a way that you won't be judged by history. You have to preserve your credibility. You need to preserve your alliances. You need to preserve friendship with other nations, so that, when you call up Narendra Modi or whatever leader, that they pick up the phone and they talk to you in good faith. And it seems to me the Trump administration completely are tone deaf to all these things. They just say and do whatever, and the next day they change the story completely, as though everybody is completely insane and stupid and don't remember what was said yesterday. And the cost is your credibility. And once you've shredded your credibility, you can't speak with anybody anymore. Nobody will take you seriously. Nobody will rely on your commitments. And you're basically isolating yourself.
Alex, it seems to me that Donald Trump himself is running out of options, because one of the main, if they go after desalination plants, they're going to lose, because Iran is getting 2% or less than 2% of their fresh water from desalination. Look at what Israel is getting from desalination. Look at all these Arab states are getting, and more than 80 to 90% in Arab states, Israel 75%. And then what else do they have? Oil? Who's going to lose in this battle of oil? There is no way out for Donald Trump with this gamble he started. And with the military, as time goes by, I think Iran is totally prepared for at least 8 to 9 years of fight with the United States and Israel. 8 to 9. Because they have this memory of the Iran-Iraq war. They know that any sort of war that comes to the region would remain to the region until they're going to be the offender. Those people, the aggressor, would be totally defeated. Then they're going to, leave the region. That's why they have been preparing for this moment, for this war, for such a long time. And Donald Trump is not prepared for that. Israel is not prepared for that. Look at the way that they're bringing all these air defense systems. I talked with Professor Ted Postel. I don't know if you saw it.
Yes, I have.
He said it doesn't matter how many air defense systems you bring to the region. The radars are not there. Then you're not going to be able to work properly against these missiles.
It's dismaying, Nima. You know that even back in 1988, the CSIS, Center for Security Studies, something, I forget what the acronym means exactly. They published a study in which they were already saying, that we don't really have the strength necessary to maintain our hegemony in that region. And they knew that they depended on power projection, meaning there was a public American official called Arthur Schlesinger. I forget his exact function, but he was saying that we need to maintain the aura of American power. He literally used those words. And we're talking almost 40 years ago. They were talking about maintaining the aura of American power. But you can maintain the aura of that power until you take a punch in the face. And then once you take the punch in the face and you fall on the floor and you're dazed and you don't know what to do next, you've completely destroyed your ability to project power. Because not only do the Iranians and Hezbollah and Ansar Allah and Hamas now see this, your allies, allies, let's call them allies, but they're actually proxies in the region, also see this. And they understand, we are here first in the line of on the front lines, because we thought that our back was secured by this greatest military power that nobody's ever seen before, right? And now they turned out to be a paper tiger. And so now, like the whole security architecture of the region is going to have to change completely. And with regards to Israel, I think they're finished. I think they're finished. The fact that they are so severely restricting what journalists can report from Israel is telling you that they're taking tremendous blows, because you're allowed to report from Israel, but apparently you're only allowed to report from civilian areas, because then they show like, oh, look, civilian areas, look what the Iranians are doing to us. But we also know that they have strategic assets underground, hidden under hospitals, universities, and private apartment blocks. So I think that Israel has committed suicide, and now we're just seeing the dying agony of the country. And that too was predicted. Henry Kissinger himself predicted the end of Israel some 14 years ago. Now it's happening.
I think we have to understand why Donald Trump is running out of options, because Lindsey Graham is just crying, begging, and threatening Saudi Arabia to join the fight. I don't know how much Saudi Arabia can bring to the battlefield.
They want anybody to go into their fight. They want anybody to join their fight. And that's, if they were winning so comfortably, they wouldn't have to be twisting arms to Al-Qaeda, to the Kurds, to Saudi Arabia, and all these small chihuahuas that have no military power in the region to go and fight, because it was a 2-3 day gamble that failed. And then they realized, oh gosh, now we need troops on the ground, because otherwise we're done. And they don't have the troops on the ground. They didn't prepare them. They didn't plan for this. And so now they're, come on, Saudis, go fight the war, show how tough you are. They would love to get Turks involved. They would like to get the Kurds involved. They would like to get Azerbaijan involved. Azerbaijan is very, very weak. They may have a military, they may have a lot of money, but they are, they are very dependent on Iran and Russia for their economy. So if they go to war against Iran, they're going to, the country collapses. It's unbelievable that they've even done. I still, Nima, I have to pinch myself and think like, how did I end up on this timeline? It's like the dumbest of the possibilities just became real.
Yeah, exactly. Alex, the Arab states called Vladimir Putin to do something. It seems that they feel that they were betrayed by the United States, and that's why they have to find an alternative. How do you see the region, the changes that are happening, not physically right now, but in the mind of those Arab leaders in the West Asia, in the Persian Gulf?
Well, I think their main concern is to stay in power. They need the next protector. Is Russia going to be their protector? I don't know. I don't see it. Iran might become their next protector, but it's going to be on Iran's terms, And, let's not forget, Iran is the most powerful presence, most powerful force in Iraq. And then, Hezbollah never disappeared. We know that part of the Syrian Arab army didn't collapse in the 2024 when Bashar al-Assad's government fell. They some parts of the Syrian Arab army went over to Iraq. They're somewhere. They didn't vaporize, right? Hezbollah is intact. I think that this period might create a power vacuum in the West Asia, and I think it might create space for Iran to rise as the undisputed regional power. It might be some form of a return of the Persian Empire. Who knows?
Alex, I think the problems of the United States with Israeli agenda in the Middle East is not ending with the case of Iran. Israel wants to pick a fight with Turkey as well. 2 days ago, we had Naftali Bennett talking again within, you have this sort of chaos. The country is getting destroyed by the Iranian missiles, and you want to pick a fight with Turkey. Here is what Naftali Bennett said.
Ask you whether there's a risk of further confrontation with Turkey based on comments that you said in the past.
Well, we need to ensure that Erdogan doesn't create a new alliance of radical Islam Sunni version, meaning an axis between himself, Julani, Qatar, and Hamas. We've been facing for many decades the Shiite radical Islam, and I hope that Turkey doesn't choose to foment terror and Islamism in its power. It's up to Turkey ultimately. If they seek peace, we definitely want peace. But if they try and surround us with terror, we will not sit idle.
I think what you remember what Tom Barak, the American envoy to Turkey, said, we cannot fight all of these Muslims all around the world because there has to be some sort of understanding. It doesn't seem that is the case when it comes to the government in Israel. They want to fight the United States until the last moment of this empire. They literally, the British project is bringing down the American empire. And they did the same. The experience is going the same way. Just imagine, Alex, the British Empire going to India, for example, a nation of India. What is it? To me, it's the same way with the American bases right now. The American bases in the Middle East, one of the most crucial bases in the Middle East, they were useless during the war. They were destroyed during the war. And Israel is just doing everything to collapse the final, the remaining power of the United States in order to make something that many people were talking about it, that this direction is leading to the collapse of the empire in the United States.
In fact, Nima, I think that's what you raise is extremely interesting to me. And I thought about it myself. And I thought ultimately the outcome of this gambit that Trump took with respect to Iran is going to be expulsion of Western interests from Western Asia. Very probably the collapse of Israel and disappearance of Israel, and very probably radical reforms of all these Gulf monarchies, maybe revolutions, maybe their disappearance as well, and then a kind of isolation of the United States as well. But another effect is going to be an economic collapse of Europe, because Europe is of everyone involved. I think Europe is the most dependent on the Middle East for energy, for things like chemical feedstocks, for agricultural, nitrogen fertilizers and so forth. And they have already destroyed their energy production. They've destroyed their coal power plants, nuclear power plants. They destroyed their relationship with Russia. So they're no longer receiving oil and gas from Russia, or they're receiving it indirectly at very highly inflated prices. And unreliable. They're getting something from the United States, but it's very expensive and it doesn't cover the market demand. Right? And then they've also spent many years destroying the farming industry. And I live in France, and I've already been noticing for the last few years that the availability of quality produce in French supermarket has diminished, but drastically. It's very, very obvious. It's not even subtle. Suddenly, okay, you got plenty of junk food, processed foods from white flour and sugar and corn syrup, variety with these flavors or that flavor. But, quality foods like quality meats and fish and eggs and even some certain kinds of fruits and vegetables, it's getting less and less and less and less. And I would say that today it's less than half of what we had maybe 3 or 4 years ago. And now with this war, it'll take a while for the effect to propagate themselves through the market. But we might end up having famines in Europe. I think that we shouldn't exclude that possibility. Unfortunately, the way human psychology works is we are not moved by threats and risks unless we experience them in the recent past and unless they had an emotional impact on us. So, like you can see people building houses in the lava flow areas, underneath volcanoes, because, maybe there has been no volcanic activities in 30 years. And people say like, wow, we've never experienced lava flow, so we'll just build a house here because it's nice. It's a nice place and it's cheap. And then, lava comes. And then once you get that sense of dread, only then you react. But, now we have had 3 generations that we had no war. We had no food shortages. We had no energy shortages. We have had almost perfect conditions to cement complacency in our mindsets. So I think that Europe is extremely vulnerable at this point. And well, that too, that crisis when it happens, when it hits us full force, is going to force reforms and changes. So then we're going back again to the need to completely change the security architecture and global, relations on Eurasian continent in the near future. And you couldn't discuss that with Kaja Kallas and with Ursula von der Leyen and Friedrich Merz and Emmanuel Macron, right? But if we have a revolution, if we have hunger, if we have a deep economic crisis, then there's no telling where it will go. But it will probably have to go in some direction dictated by the only powers that matter. And that's Russia, China, Iran, United States. And the United States, God only knows. Trump, I think, is done. I don't see how he wins the midterms, but who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if J.D. Vance will be able to win the presidential elections in 3 years. That's now at risk. So who knows who is going to be in the White House 3 years from now. But on the Eurasian continent, it's Russia, China, Iran. And I think that everybody in the end, European countries included, will have to make peace with new realities. Certain countries are already leaning in that direction, like Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary. Romania might also join because, the current government has no legitimacy, so it probably won't survive for long. German government under Friedrich Merz might not survive for long. France is due for a civil war or a revolution, and so is Great Britain. So we've been talking about this for a long time, Nima, that we are at a juncture where 500 years of history are changing into something different, and I think that now we're seeing it happen. I think that 28 February was the catalyst, that's going to accelerate everything.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alex, for being with us today.
Always a pleasure, Nima. Thank you for having me, and until the next time.
See you soon, Alex. Bye-bye.